Good morning, everybody. It is the Awesemo MLB Strategy Show Friday night. Massive NBA slate, 13 games for Eric and I to talk about. Do us a favor as you come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to Prize Picks, who's sponsoring the show. Eric, what do you make of a 13-game slate? You and I haven't done any that have been this size yet this year. I think there's only been one or two slates that have been quite this big for a baseball slate. But how do you approach this differently than, say, like a 7 or 8 game slate?
I love massive MLB slates. They're just my favorite. You get opportunities to play some of the best plays, and it's not that hard to get different in a way that makes sense. You get an opportunity to know that if you're constructing lineups correctly, that's something, if you're hand building stuff in the $15 in some of these bigger tournaments that you want to take shots in, you can be very, very live. And, it reminds me a lot of NFL Sundays where, when you put together lineups, you feel like you're live before the slate starts, as opposed to having like a 1v1 in like a 3-game or 4-game MLB slate that can make the difference between $100K and, $200, something like that. So I love these massive slates. It's a lot of work going through some of these. I wish the Cincinnati game was on it so that we could roster my boy Green, but such is life. We're starting up 7:05 p.m. Eastern time, 13-game MLB slate, as well as 3 games for NBA that you and I will be on tonight. A lot of work ahead of us today, my friend.
Yeah, so I think this is the biggest difference with 13-game baseball slates as opposed to a 5 or 6 game slate or smaller, is ownership plays less of a role. It's not to say it isn't important. And, if you do look at our top stacks, well, you're going to see teams like the Los Angeles Angels, the New York Yankees right now that are massively negatively leveraged and do look like they're overowned. But for the most part, you're just seeing a lot of teams that are, around appropriately owned or 1 or 2 percentage points off. And then in terms of pitchers, we're not going to see Marco Gonzalez, who's 70% owned. That's not something that happens on a 13-game slate.
Oh God.
So, it's also not a thing where we have to look and be like, oh, we need to get leverage off of this pitcher because he's overowned. Like, those situations don't exist as much. It's more so of let's try to identify the best spots and try to focus on that. And then also, I have to stack a lesser percentage of the team. This is, If I'm playing a 3 or 4 game baseball slate, I'm trying to figure out like, okay, I'm stacking all of these teams. What percentage do I want of each of them? 13-game slate, there's 26 teams to choose from. It's more so like, all right, which teams do I want to pick? Which teams do I want to stack in my player pool? Because I can't stack all 26 teams. I mean, I could, but that would be a difficult proposition in a large field tournament. Be like, I'm playing everybody. So that's something else that definitely weighs when we're talking about this. But let's get into breaking down the game by game because 13 games and a lot to talk about here. But the first one, San Francisco Giants against the Washington Nationals. It is going to be Sam Long on the mound for San Francisco, making his season debut. Patrick Corbin for Washington. And Eric, you and I both like the Giants offense a little bit for yesterday's earlier slate. It went poorly. It's to the point where not only did they not score runs, but they also allowed the opposite pitcher, Carlos Carrasco, to be one of the highest scoring pitchers on the slate, one that was necessary for tournaments. But this is an easier matchup for them against Patrick Corbin. Corbin was good in his last start, but keep in mind, that was against a Pirates offense, number one, and then number two, a Pirates offense that was resting half of the regular players. So I think that Patrick Corbin is on the decline at this point in his career. I think this is a good spot to get back to the Giants. Are you feeling scorned by what happened yesterday, or are you going to give them a second chance?
No, me being dramatic and upset about something that happened in sports, that is not possible and not something that I would do. Yeah, no, I'm a little upset. I'm upset because they had 2-1, nobody out, got one across in the second, and somehow Carrasco got out of that with just 1 earned, and it was a joke. And yes, Dylan Cease, we were going back and forth where he wasn't good, so it probably didn't matter already. But I like the San Francisco Giants team up against right-handed pitching. We have a lot of lefties, especially when they get Lamont Wade Jr. back. There's going to be lefties up and down this lineup. Duggar on the bottom end, and of course, Yastrzemski, Bell, Crawford, so many guys from the left side. Corbin being from the left side is interesting because, you piece together, Wilmer Flores is going to be in this lineup. That's a decent enough guy, historically beaten up on lefties, but it's not as intriguing of a spot for me to just be targeting up against Corbin. Has he been good over the course of the last couple of years? No, he has not been good. And is he going to be somebody that people use as a safety valve on the cheap end? Not really. So I don't really find it to be the most intriguing offense to get to the way that I did yesterday.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big difference with today versus yesterday when it came to the Carrasco, and once again, this is going to apply to somewhat of a smaller slate, but Carrasco was expected to have a little bit of ownership. The Giants were also expected to be really low owned. I still think this is a good spot for the Giants. They have the highest odds of being a top stack on the entire slate in our top stacks. Do we have them with an 8% chance, which we had a bunch of questions yesterday where people were like, how come the margins are so thin between this team and that team? Well, when you've got a 13-game slate with 26 teams, the Giants have the best odds being the top scoring team of the day, and it is at 7.8%. So no team is massively likely to be the highest scoring team, and the Giants are picking up 12% ownership. So it looks slightly overowned. Still, I think a team we should be getting exposure to just because of the matchup against Patrick Corbin. And the other side, Sam Long mentioned he's going to be making his MLB debut, his season debut. He had a really weird role last year where he had a bunch of games where he pitched out of the bullpen, but then would pitch extended innings out of. Oh no, that was 2 years ago. Where he
I think he's pretty much unplayable. I doubt he goes. Yeah. I mean, he's had 2 appearances, 9 and 18 pitches in the early going. I can't see him going over 40. I think even at 4K, I think he's remotely unplayable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the point I was going to make about his games from last year is, so he had what was it, a handful of appearances, some of as a starter, some out of the bullpen, 5 starts, 7 relief appearances. Oftentimes he went deeper out of the bullpen than he did as a starter. And then, like you said, this year, he's made 3 appearances, 2 and 2/3 innings total. This is his first time pitching as a starter. I should note his first start of the season. Will always look good this year. There's going to be no length out of him, but at the same time, I don't think he's terrible. The Nationals offense isn't particularly good. So on a slate of this size, where we're kind of trying to figure out some of the spots to cut out, I think the Nationals are probably going to be one of them.
Yep. I think I'm going to always have interest in guys like Soto. I'm always going to have interest in guys like Nelson Cruz. But a bullpen game against San Francisco isn't the most likely candidate for me to say, oh, I really need to get there. So as much as I like those 2 guys, we'll see what the ownership lands on. Soto always ends up double-digit % owned, even on a larger slate like this. But that is the nice thing about a 13-game MLB slate. Yesterday, Washington was obviously in a good spot. We were seeing some extreme ownership. If you went up in high dollar, it was like 35-40% there for Soto. You're going to get one of the best hitters in baseball for around 10%. That's never going to be something as a one-off that I argue against.
Yep. I think it's pretty clear. If there's any one hitter I had a roster from Washington, it'd be Juan Soto and then Nelson Cruz, and then everything else is whatever. I don't think it's a team I'm going to be stacking for a 13-game slate. And let's move on to the next one. There's a really interesting guy to talk about because we have the Milwaukee Brewers going up against the Philadelphia Phillies. Freddie Peralta on the mound for Milwaukee, and it has not been a good start for Peralta. 11.57 ERA, 6.32 expected ERA, still generating strikeouts, 27% K rate, so lower than what we've seen in previous years, but still generating the swing and misses. But the struggles have been real. The offense he's going up against, also good offense in Philadelphia. Also, the park. Hitter-friendly park. And there is a little bit of ownership here going to Freddie Peralta. He's projected for 19% ownership on DraftKings. FanDuel only projected for 5% ownership. It's really small sample sizes. We've seen 2 starts from Freddie Peralta. He's thrown less than 10 innings. So I don't want to read into it too much, but the results have not been great. So how do you look at Freddie Peralta? And then also, how much of previous year's stats are you weighing at the start of the season compared to just what we've seen through 2 outings?
Yeah, Freddie Peralta, I spent a lot of time on this morning. He's a guy that I don't think he has a really good feel for his slider right now. He's throwing it more than 10% less than he did last season. But the big difference is just an 8.3% whiff percentage on that pitch. It was his strikeout pitch last season, 43.1% whiff percentage. That was the best of any of his allotment of pitches. And as we look at the curveball, I think that he's going to have to find that feel for the slider again if he's going to be successful, if he's going to be putting guys out. He still had a 27% K percentage, but it's just that slider is getting beat up to the tune of a 1.176 expected slugging. It's not a good situation right now for him. I would like to see that pitch. Again, this might just be an early season thing where a number of teams, a number of pitchers that might be more affected by not having a spring training or a normal spring training than other pitchers. So I am not having alarm bells going off for Freddie Peralta. Similar yesterday to, well, I still want to see with Carrasco. I still also want to see another couple starts where Freddie Peralta is absolutely getting hit up before I start hitting the panic button. I still think he's a very serviceable pitcher. I think we're going to see some discounted ownership compared to what we would if this were 2021. Both of those things sitting at around 20%, 19% over on DK. He's sub 9K. I still think he's an elite arm. as it keeps going. The velocity is in the exact same spot it was last season, like half a mile per hour lower at the moment. That's about normal. So I'm not hitting the panic button yet.
So I'm not hitting the panic button, but I'm ready to hit the panic button. As we've got the Phillies are projected for 0.7% ownership today on DraftKings. Nobody is stacking this team. And at least as of now, Freddie Peralta, he's in some lineups. I think you're correct in saying there's a good chance his ownership ends up being lower than what it is. But the Phillies offense is projected for just over 1% ownership on FanDuel, under 1% on DK. And like we said, the results for Freddie Peralta have not been good. So do I think this is who he is as a pitcher? No, probably not. But could it take him a few starts to figure it out? Certainly. So I'm willing to go to the Phillies offense here at no ownership and just saying, like, maybe Peralta is, like we said, either perhaps hitters have figured him out. He's a limited pitch repertoire, which is generally not great for a starting pitcher. He's trying to work in a curveball this year. It's going poorly. He's throwing curveball 15% of the time, and it's something he only threw 11% of the time last year, 10% the year before. His slider usage is down a lot this year. He's trying to up his changeup percentage. His fastball usage, 66.5% for his career, only 52.7% this year. So he's using his fastball less. It looks like he's trying to figure stuff out. And as long as this is the case, give me a really potent Phillies offense with no ownership and in a hitter-friendly park. So that's kind of where I'm standing here, as long as the ownership doesn't change. Are you going to be looking to get to the Phillies offense? You just saying you think that Peralta has a good chance to figure it out?
Yeah, absolutely. I am. I'm with you where it's too good of an offense to say that, oh, if the struggles aren't real, I shouldn't be having more than the 0.7% ownership share that exists. I mean, they're completely unowned, and we know how it's a murderer's row of lefties. I mean, you add Schwarber into this lineup in the heart of it. That is ridiculous. You have Bryce Harper, NL MVP. You have Castellanos on the other side of it, but still somebody that's going to make hard contact. Real Muto, one of the best hitting catchers in all of baseball, if not the best hitting catcher. I feel pretty good that this is a Phillies offense you still want to get exposure to, even out of 150. It's going to be pretty simple for me to play a little bit of Peralta. Again, I'm not going to play a massive amount. I'm just saying that he's a guy that I think I'll get to around the field, if not a little bit more, based on just what his 2021 and everything's previously. But your concerns are definitely there. I think we're seeing a lot of the same things in terms of his pitch repertoire, where there are concerns that you have there, but we need more sample size, and I'm willing to play both sides of it.
Yeah, and what's funny is we have something kind of similar on the other side of the game, because Ranger Suarez is starting pitcher for the Phillies. He was exceptional last year, 1.36 ERA, 2.6 expected ERA. And this year has sucked so far. It's only 7 2/3 innings, but he's a 5.87 ERA, a 4.2 expected ERA. And here are the really concerning things in the early going. Last year, 25.6% K rate. So far this year, 13.2% K rate. Last year, at a 7.9% walk rate. So far this year, 10.5% walk rate. So he's walking nearly as many guys as he's striking out. And once again, very limited sample size. But you just start to wonder. Ranger Suarez was an unheralded prospect who came out of nowhere and just crushed last year. And you just start to wonder, was last year a fluke and we're never going to see that guy again? He doesn't have the most difficult matchup in the world going up against the Brewers. But once again, this is a hitter-friendly park. What are you going to be doing about the Brewers and about Ranger Suarez? Because I do think there's a lot of parallels between this situation and then the Peralta versus the Phillies.
Yeah, Phillies, most leveraged team in the top stacks tool, Milwaukee second. So this entire game feels like one where the offenses are going underappreciated. This is the nice thing about a 13-game slate is Milwaukee, I feel like, has been pretty popular in the early going of this season. And this is just where they're going to go unowned. I mean, it's still a guy that has some name recognition from last season where he really excelled. Like, there's really not a whole lot to say negative about a 2.6 expected ERA, a 1.36 actual ERA, pretty ridiculous what we saw out of him. A guy that just saw some massive, massive improvements. I don't think either of us really bought into that for a long-term kind of a quick fix here that he had in 2021. It's definitely not coming to fruition in the early going. Could I see Ranger Suarez being all right with the number of lefties that exist in this lineup? Sure, but I also see an opportunity to get to a completely unowned Milwaukee team, which rarely happens, it feels like. So I'm with you. I think both offenses stick out. Keston Hiura, nice to see him back in the party. A guy with a massive K percentage, but nice to see him actually making some contact here. He was a guy that I expected to be decent for them. Basically disappeared. It just lost the bat completely last season. So he's a guy that is going to start moving up in the order. Adames, resurgent, leaving Tampa Bay to this team. Have no idea how he got as good as what he was with the bat last season, but still somebody get from the right side. And Hunter Renfroe up against any lefty. Big improvement. McCutchen, Yelich from either side, doesn't matter. Pretty simple way for me to look at Milwaukee as a team that can succeed.
Whenever I hear side, it doesn't matter. I always think of who was the NBA player that had the quote, left hand, right hand, it don't matter, I'm amphibious.
I have no idea.
You never heard that before?
No, I haven't. But I saw Marcus Smart where he just, because he had the tape on the finger and he made the little left hand ridiculous circus shot at the end of last game.
Let's see who was. Oh, it was Charles Shackelford. Left
hand. I
have
no
right
idea
hand.
Who the hell that is.
He was a guy who was in the NBA. But either way, it's one of my all-time favorite NBA quotes. So there's two. There's that one from Charles Shackelford, left hand, right hand, it don't matter, I'm amphibious. And then the Antoine Walker quote, where he set the NBA record for most threes missed in a game. I think he went 0 for 13 or something like crazy terrible. And a reporter asked Antoine Walker after the game, why did you keep shooting so many threes? And he said, because there ain't no fours. Which is also absolutely hilarious. And that's the kind of confidence I try to live my life with. Is you come out, you take your shots, you miss, but you never stop shooting. So shout out to Antoine Walker.
I make. That's the Sevi.
What was that?
So at the Masters, Sevi Ballesteros, they're like, how did you make a 9? How did you make a 9 on number 18? He goes, I make. I was like,
that's all. Yeah. That's also, I prefer the Antoine Walker quote because the Sevi one is just very matter of fact. The Antoine Walker's one is like, I have the most amount of just undeserved confidence that I am going to fire no matter what. Anyway, live your life like Antoine Walker. You go 0 for 13 from 3. You look for 4s. And as for Keston Hiura, because I just pulled up his numbers while you were talking about it, really, really weird career arc for him because he was a top 10 prospect in all of baseball when he gets called up. And his rookie season, he crushed 139 WRC plus. He produced 2.4 wins above replacement in that rookie year in 84 games, only playing half the season after getting called up. What does he do in the next 2 seasons? 87 WRC plus, 52 WRC plus, below replacement level player in each of those 2 years. He's come out this year looking better, 113 WRC plus. I'm skeptical though, because he still has a 38.1% K rate. We'll see where this goes, but there's still clearly upside in that.
He got sent down to AAA 2 years ago because he just couldn't stop striking out. It was so ridiculous. And at least they've gotten him to make some more contact here, and we'll see how it progresses here. But it's a piece that I think is just too highly touted, and he was too good early on in his career. I think eventually he was going to start figuring some stuff out, but pitchers have obviously been able to adjust to him. But against lefties, I'm a little bit more inclined to just say, screw it. There's enough power there to be viable.
Yeah, by the way, Aaron D in the chat is explaining, no, you have it wrong. It's ambidextrous. Amphibious is what I know. That's why the quote is so funny. Is because he told the media after the
joke.
Game. Yeah, that's literally what's.
But it's that meme joke.
But when Charles Shackelford said it, he was totally serious. He was not saying it as a joke. He thought that amphibious was what the proper phrasing was. That aside, let's move on here. The Cleveland Guardians against the New York Yankees. Have you seen a starting pitcher for Cleveland? Because I have not seen one confirmed.
I have not.
All right, so we are going to have to, unfortunately, kind of skip talking about the Yankees because we don't know who the pitcher is that they're going up against right now, which is...
I mean, can we assume it's going to be some kind of a bullpen game? I think that's kind of the assumption I'm making.
Let's see. What have they started recently?
But I'm looking... Oh, okay, Eli Morgan. All right,
so I mean, if it's Eli Morgan, he's... out. Yeah, so Eli Morgan...
89 pitches already. We had to start.
Okay, so if Eli Morgan is going to start, which, by the way, earlier in the day, there was no confirmed starting pitcher. He's made 3
he's appearances. On the DraftKings site now. He's on the DraftKings. Okay. So he's had 18, 46, 25 pitches. So he has not stretched out in any capacity, but 3 innings pitched. Yeah, 46 is the most he's gotten up to. And you're 7,700, a guy who's looking at maybe 6K or 60 pitches, like as an absolute top off. Going to be tough to get to that.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing, too, with Eli Morgan is he got hit very hard last year. He had a 5.34 ERA, a 5.24 expected ERA, fairly high home run to fly ball rate. Once again, he was a fairly high regarded prospect at one point, But here's the issue with his minor league numbers. Those weren't all that great either. So I tend to think Eli Morgan probably not a good pitcher at this point in time. He's going up against a very potent offense, obviously, in the New York Yankees. But the Yankees are picking up a ton of ownership. So now we could actually talk about this because we found out that Eli Morgan is expected to start. Good spot for New York, but what are you going to do with them when they are projected for 13.5% ownership as a team on DraftKings with a 6% chance to be a top stack? And then looking over at FanDuel, where I also assume that they're going to be really popular. They are projected for, 14% ownership, the highest ownership on the team, 6.7% chance to be a top stack. So what I was saying at the top of the show, in general, ownership slightly less important on a 13-game slate, but there's still individual spots that are going to be massively over on the Yankees being one of them. So what will you be doing with them as an offense?
If you ever catch me playing a 25% Aaron Judge on a 13-game slate as a one-off, just take my DK account away from me. Just don't let me play anymore because Aaron Judge should only be included in stacks for the most part. I will find lower owned one-offs. If he ends up putting up a double dong at 25%, I will live with it. It's whatever. But on a 13-game slate, I would just rather play the ownership spot because, I mean, he basically needs like a home run isn't even necessarily going to be what ends up burning you. It's going to be like that massive Aaron Judge ceiling game. And at 25%, you should never have that. In my opinion, that's just not something that I'm going to do. But I will definitely have him in stacks. I will definitely stack this team up. It's too good of a team not to. And if I do go to some one-offs, it's pretty easy to look at a guy like Rizzo, who's just massively overpriced at 5,400 up against a righty and Eli Morgan. Looking at Aaron Hicks, 3,600. He's at 12% basically on DK. I think that that's going to be a little bit easier for me to land on as well. But Aaron Judge, he's the one bat that's just going crazy popular. Everybody else is lower than 15% owned. So Judge will only be included in stacks for me. I will not be one-offing him.
Yeah, so for me, I'm more inclined to just not make any stacks of the Yankees if they're going to be this negatively leveraged, and I'll just look elsewhere. There's 26 teams to choose from. There's only one that's picking up 15% ownership in the Yankees. So this is subject to change. Once again, we don't have a totally confirmed starting pitcher in Eli Morgan. So it is something where maybe some of the data changes when the
Whoa. I'm not saying Judge hate. This is not Judge hate. This is not me saying Judge is not a phenomenal baseball player, that he's bad. I'm saying that he's 25% owned. It wouldn't matter if it was Mike Trout. It wouldn't matter if it was heyday Babe Ruth. It doesn't matter if it's Michael Lorenzen. It doesn't matter who it is. If they are going to be very, very popular as an outfielder, only Greg got that joke. It's fine. If you are expensive in the outfield specifically, where there's 50 million options to choose from on a 13-game slate, and you're 25% owned, there's not a chance in God's green earth that I'm going to play you as a one-off.
If you don't hate Aaron Judge, can you explain the text message you sent to me where you said that Aaron Judge has a stupid gap in his teeth and he has a small penis?
No comment.
Okay. He hates him. Confirmed. Other side of the game, Jameson Taillon starting for the New York Yankees. Taillon is also not as much a young pitcher at this point in his career, but also at one point was very well regarded. He's had some kind of unforeseen setbacks in his career, but when he's been on the mound, we've seen him with potential at times to be a high upside pitcher. His strikeout rate last year was at 23.2%. Now this year, though, he's not walking anybody, 2.6% walk rate. But the strikeout rates also come down at 21.1%. He's a 3.72 ERA, but a 4.7 expected ERA. The Guardians offense, I don't think it's going to be good this year, but they keep hitting pitchers, particularly good pitchers. You and I yesterday, we were really in on Dylan Cease. It wasn't just that Dylan Cease got hit hard. He could not generate swing and misses against Cleveland. And that was one of the other reasons, Austin, we were texting you about it. I was like, oh, the reason I really thought the start was going to go poorly for Dylan Cease, and this was after the fact, obviously not before. He was my most rostered player by a mile on that slate, is he hit it through 3 innings. Dylan Cease had 2 swing and misses. I was like, this is just not going to go well for him. It was just only a matter of time before he got hit and started to give up runs at that rate. So I do get concerned about the upside maybe in pitchers going against the Guardians when we just see the amount of contact that they're making. So with that in mind, I'm still not super high in Cleveland because I think the offense is going to be bad for the rest of the season, but I don't know that I necessarily want to roster Jameson Taillon against them when you consider the amount of contact they've been making. But what do you make of Cleveland Taillon? Do you see it differently?
I'm with you. I don't think that Stephen Kwan, his 382 batting average, he's a slappy McSlapperson. Let's be serious. He has a 24.2% hard hit percentage on the season. that is low, low, low. We're looking at him with a 6.4% K percentage, though, and a 19.1% walk rate. I mean, the guy is obviously up there in the 2-hole for a reason, and it is to get on base and set the table for Jose Ramirez, because then home runs count for one more. That's math, kids. Josh Naylor, I assume that he's going to be in this lineup as well. He's generally been in the lineup against righties here from the left side. He was with San Diego once upon a time here. He has first base and outfield eligibility. He's a contact guy as well. 6.7% K percentage here in the early going of this season. So yet another guy who fits into that mold of guys that are just hard to get out. Miles Straw, speed and utility as far as contact goes. I guess Josh Naylor in 2021, 18% K percentage. So maybe there's some regression coming in that department here. But Miles Straw, for sure, another guy going back to Houston time, just doesn't strike out a lot. Ahmed Rosario has been down to a 17.3% K percentage. So there's not a lot of strikeouts to be had. And as much as Jameson Taillon's been serviceable, still just 21.1% K percentage in the early going of this season. He's been around that number for his entire career. So I don't think much is going to change there. I think he's not even like a safe option. That's a weird way of putting it. He's just like an okay option that if you get some shares of in 150, whatever, but my God, is he unappealing to me.
Yep. I don't think he's all that necessary. So easy spot here where I think we kind of remove some pieces from our player pool, which is kind of necessary to figure where we want to do that on a 13-game slate. So moving on, Boston Red Sox, Tampa Bay Rays, Michael Wacha on the mound for Tampa. He's off to a really good start this year. Same for Corey Kluber, who, I got them mixed up because I'm used to Michael Wacha pitching for Tampa. Michael Wacha pitching for Boston, Corey Kluber on the mound for Tampa. Both these guys, older pitchers who have had their ups and downs, seem to be on the decline, that are off to really good starts this year. So Michael Wacha has an ERA of 0.96, Corey Kluber an ERA of 1.86. I don't think that's going to continue for obvious reasons, but also these are really difficult matchups that these teams are in with the Rays offense and the Red Sox offense. Then you've also got Michael Wacha's 6,600 on DK projected for some ownership. Corey Kluber all the way up to 9,600 picking up ownership. I guess I could look at Wacha's maybe being a serviceable SP2 if he wasn't projected for nearly 20% ownership and just the matchup against the Rays as well. So I think I'm going to be avoiding these pitchers, but what are you going to do with them?
Duke wants to play him, apparently. Michael Wacha, Corey Kluber, man, look at these two. I mean, they're number 3 and 4 in the top 2 pitchers tool. Kind of a ridiculous situation that we have here in trying to figure out what to do with them. I am shocked that Michael Wacha at 6,600 is popping up that much in terms of value. He's second best on the board behind Adam Oler, which is just mind-blowing to me. I don't think that's something I'm going to be doing. But Michael Wacha, I think he's serviceable as a piece of value going up against a Tampa Bay team in Tampa Bay. That's just a ballpark that I'm willing to take some shots. There's enough strikeouts that are there for Michael Wacha, not generally a strikeout guy. It's been a good start for him. I feel better than you probably do. I mean, it's him or Trevor Rogers for me, and I think I'm going to probably get shares of both of them in order to fit a lot of these bats. On a 13-game slate, that's the other thing that really exists is, we can go for some value, and we've got pitchers, but there are so many good offenses that are on the same slate that you have to be targeting a number of these guys, and they are not cheap. A number of these stacks that are not cheap. And so to make way for it, I think Michael Wacha, a guy I might land on more. Corey Kluber is interesting, 9,600. That's definitely the opposite of what I was just saying, where it's not going to be somebody that I'm going to land on as much, just because a little bit lower K percentage at this point in his career. We've seen regression from that number that was around 34.1% in 2017. It's only plummeted since then, 23.1% in the early going and walking guys. I'm less inclined to play him and more inclined to play Wacha. I don't know what planet I'm on.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing too with Kluber, it's just, he's so expensive on DraftKings at 9,600. And then over on FanDuel, where it's a single pitcher site, he's a little cheaper at 8,200, but I don't really have a strong desire to play Corey Kluber in this matchup at 8,200. So for me, I think the pitchers are good enough to where I don't have a massive amount of interest in the offense. In the offenses, they do look about appropriately owned right now. If we look at the top stacks tool, both of them low percentage probability chance to go off, and ownership also fairly low. So I think these are going to be teams that are in my player pool, but just low percentage teams, maybe like 4% Tampa Bay, 3% Boston, like somewhere around there in the player pool, but not teams that are massively different in the field. In terms of the offenses, what do you think you're going to be looking to do with them?
I'm looking at playing Brandon Lau, G-Man Choi, Wander Franco, my guys, like my absolute dudes. I like these guys so much, but it's going to be hard for me to want to just like full on stack this team up. But G-Man Choi making some really hard contact at the beginning of this season. That's what he does against righties. And Brandon Lau eternally will be somebody that I'm overweight to. But this ballpark is not the most appealing one to be full stacking it up. I guess if Michael Wacha is going to be as popular as what we're looking at, there's definitely some viability to stacking it up, and you're going to get a pretty low-owned team. But you can get that on so many spots on this slate that I'm more inclined to just play the best hitters from this lineup. You know, maybe a 5-2-1 type deal over on DK or something of that kind of nature, where I force in a couple of those two-mans, G-Man Choi and Brandon Lau, but not going to be something that I'm going crazy with.
All right, let's move on to the next game, and we get to talk about one of my favorite plays on the slate because it is the Detroit Tigers against the Colorado Rockies. If you're not excited yet, because who doesn't get excited for a Colorado Rockies game when they're away from Coors Field in Detroit against the Tigers, we get our guy, Tyreek Skubal, on the mound. Is Skubal good? No, not particularly, but you know what he does do? He strikes people out. So actually, it was his last start that you and I bet the over on his strikeouts, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we smashed it, and it torched it in 3 innings or 4 innings.
I think the number was 4.5, and he had 5 strikeouts the first 7 hitters he faced. Can I guarantee that Skubal is going to pitch well? No, absolutely not. But what I can guarantee, if he does pitch well, it's going to come with strikeouts. It's kind of the only way he's able to get guys out is by generating swing and misses. And for his career, 26% K rate. He's a guy that's certainly capable of whiffing hitters. And the other thing, too, this Rockies offense sucks, particularly when you take it away from Coors Field. In Colorado, anybody could score runs from time to time. It's a ballpark that's massively favorable towards hitters. But now in this spot against Skubal on the road, I like Skubal a whole bunch. Are you going to be with me?
Oh, my God. Yeah, this is probably my favorite tournament pitcher on the slate. And he has been for routinely the last couple of years. That's the Skubal experience, is you stack up against him. But I don't even know if I want to get too much Colorado on the other side. I think I got to play my boy CJ Cron a little bit as a one-off, but holy mother of God, Skubal, this is like the ideal spot to roster him, is you get a team that just has weak contact. You get the perhaps worst offense in baseball when you take them away from Coors. Actually, I'm not going to call them worse than the Orioles or the Athletics. You are?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But they have CJ Cron, who is a better hitter than anybody there.
I mean, Trey Mancini's somewhat comparable.
Trey Mancini's comparable, but like CJ Cron's way better than Trey Mancini.
And actually, Cedric Mullins.
Cedric Mullins is the best hitter out of everybody. Yes, but CJ Cron has the most power out of anybody. I think that's pretty clear cut. 761 expected slugging here. He's going to have a great year, especially considering half of his games are in Coors Field. This is going back to Detroit. Revenge spot for those NBA people that enjoy that. CJ Cron, I don't know how you have revenge in 4 or 5 at bats, but such is life. He'll be the one bat that I try to get to a little bit of, but there's just weak contact all over the board everywhere else here. Connor Joe's had a pretty decent start to the season. Elias Diaz in the catcher spot. I think this team might get stacked up a little bit more as the day goes on, just because you see Skubal's 2021 numbers, and there is a lot of hard contact, bottom 10% in hard hit percentage, bottom 10% in xWOBA amongst all starters. So there are some concerns you have with our boy Skubal, but that K percentage is just awfully enticing every slate.
I'm going to be heavy on Skubal. As for the other side of the game, no interest in anything. Antonio Senzatella, he's not good. He doesn't totally suck, but for fantasy purposes, he is not appealing because he does not generate swing and misses. Ground ball pitcher, pitches to contact. Then as for the Tigers, I don't really love the spot for them against Senzatella. I don't think the Tigers offense is particularly good. They are picking up a little bit of ownership. So no Tiger screen, no Senzatella. Is there anything that you see differently when it comes to this matchup?
I'm Coach O, go Tigers. I gotta have a little bit. I gotta have a little bit of Tigers. It's Senzatella is so bad. I've always just hated this guy, and so far, bottom 1% in xERA, bottom 1% expected batting average in the early going of this season. 152 pitches, so it's not like a zero sample size. 10.62 expected ERA, despite a 2.16 ERA. I definitely have some interest in stacking up against him. I'm probably on the opposite side of you.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, he's been serviceable the last couple of years. And then also keep in mind, his numbers are inflated from pitching at Coors Field. But, last year, 4.42 ERA, 4.3 expected ERA. The year before, 3.44 ERA, 4.58 expected ERA. And it's just the high ground ball rate that kind of makes me question, what is the legitimate upside here? Once again, not looking too much at this year where he's pitched 8 innings, but 51.2% ground ball rate last year, the year before 50.8%, the year before 53.8. Could the Tigers get to Senzatella? Sure, but I think it would just be a lot of singles and ultimately not yield that much upside. So
Austin Meadows, 4,200, I will have quite a bit of. Akil Baddoo, I said Akil Badon't, and then he went out and like donged and went completely bonkers. So I take everything back. I'm going to roster some of this guy. I might have a little bit more interest just because I don't see them being all that popular. Robbie Grossman, it's all right as long as you're getting him from the right side. That seems to be his preferred spot. I assume he leads off here, 3,600. Not anything to get carried away from, but I will definitely have 5-mans of this team.
All right, let's move on to the next spot. Then Atlanta Braves at home against the Miami Marlins, and the Marlins offense is becoming through in some odd spots this year. Kyle Wright is off to a really good start this year, and Kyle Wright could not have been worse in the last couple of years. And I don't know what to make of him because he is somebody who was once a really well-regarded pitching prospect. Once again, we've only seen him pitch 11 innings this year, but he's striking everybody out. He's not walking anybody. He's a 1.64 ERA, 1.39 expected ERA. But here are his last few years before this. Last year, and he only made 2 starts last year, but he had 9.95 ERA, 11.61 expected ERA. The year before, 5.21 ERA, 6.69 expected ERA. 2019, 8.69 ERA, 7.7 expected ERA. Do you think Kyle Wright is do you think he's closer to the guy that we've seen pitch from this year, or do you think he's more likely the guy from the last few years?
Well, I mean, that's a silly question. We have 2 starts as opposed to like a bajillion. So I will take the larger sample size if I'm going to say this guy is one or the other. But there's definitely some improvement that's happened through 2 starts. And he's mowing guys out. 9 strikeouts against San Diego, 6 against Cincinnati, and just 76 pitches in that first outing. For me, it comes down to he's 9,300. That's pretty expensive. So I have to compare him to some of these other top tier guys. But I'm okay to take the shot to say that he's had some massive improvement. Miami, you've talked about them coming through in some odd spots, but this is not a negative matchup. I still don't view it as such. I find it to still be positive in terms of bats, in terms of swings and misses here. So I'm more inclined to take the shots, saying that he's actually had some improvement than you. Of course, I'm going to weigh the larger sample size a little bit more, but on the whole, I think he's got to be a guy that not going crazy with, but he's less than 1% owned. That's kind of incorrect to me.
If he was cheaper, I could get behind. He's 9,300 on DK, 9,000 on FanDuel. It's such a big price tag that once again, I'm just looking for spots to try to cut out on a big slate. And my inclination is just no Kyle Wright for me, no Marlins offense, and just be okay, live with the results of that. Because once again, Kyle Wright, I think there's reason to think he could be improved, but not to the point that I think he should be a 9,300 pitcher, honestly, with this many options. So I'm just going to be writing it off. And then on the other side of the game, there's also a pitcher I don't know exactly what to make of, because Trevor Rogers was one of the best young pitchers in baseball last year. He had a 2.64 ERA, 3.37 expected ERA, but he did trail off in the second half of the season and dealt with some shoulder stiffness. Now to start this year, he's really struggling with command, which maybe we could chalk this up to no spring training because he's a 14.3% carry, which is way different than what we saw out of Trevor Rogers last year. He's a really tough matchup against the Atlanta Braves, who are the defending champs. They're getting the rings tonight. Ron Acuna isn't going to be playing in this game, but he's nearing a return. Trevor Rogers versus the Atlanta Braves. Which side are you going with?
Yeah, you said 14.3%. It's a 14.3% walk rate, 17.1% K percentage. It's not going to be all that good going forward for him if he's got these walks up. It's kind of interesting. Kyle Wright's the guy who I had more walk concerns for, and now he's just eliminated that. And now Trevor Rogers is the guy on the other side of this game who's just walking everybody. So I find it tough to really go crazy with Trevor Rogers, but looking at the top pitchers tool, he's sitting there at 6,500. I talked about him and Waka being at the exact same numbers. I think I have to have some interest in terms of trying to get to some bats. Glenn Otto is a guy we'll talk about here for Texas. I'm not sure what to make about it, what to make of him, but it's up against an Oakland lineup that I'm willing to take shots with young pitchers or just random pitchers anytime that I possibly can. But sitting at 6,500, 7% top 2 pitcher percentage, 7.5% ownership. He's all right to land on. We've seen some form out of him before. I think the K's get back up to around that 28% number eventually, but it's just a question of if we're going to be struggling here early on, you don't want to be overinvested.
Yeah, and then the one thing that's good about only 6,500 and with the potential upside we've seen from him in the past, I hate the matchup against the Braves. And I'm not going to be stacking the Braves against Trevor Rogers. But just in terms of arm talent, I'm willing to take some shots on him, at least on DK. FanDuel on a single pitcher site, not as much. DK 2-pitcher site, I'll take some shots on him just because he is so cheap as an SP2 option. Don't feel great about it. And whatever the results are, I'm not going to be surprised by it. But I think he's worth having in the player pool. Moving on to the next game, your Minnesota Twins against the Chicago White Sox. Fairly low total in this game of 8 runs. On the mound for Minnesota is Bailey Ober. On the mound for the White Sox, Michael Kopech. So 2 young, fairly well-regarded pitching prospects. Which of them do you prefer in this matchup, if either?
Bailey Ober, I don't know what to make of this. I'm so biased. I'm so aware of it. And Bailey Ober is not off to the start you would want here, but I've never really believed in him. It sounds like a mean thing to say, but 25.3% K percentage last year, just a 5% walk rate, but the 4.54 expected ERA was always concerning to me. And he's, for such a tall dude, for like a 6'9", 6'10" dude, he looks like George Mearsham up there on the mound. He's just doesn't throw with much velocity. It's so strange to watch. He's kind of a deception type pitcher, which is weird for the 6'10" guy up there on the mound who just is trying to throw some of these off-speed offerings and just locating decently. I don't think he's a very good pitcher. Well, Michael Kopech, I sure have always thought was going to be a stud. We saw what he's capable of out of the pen there as he was coming off of Tommy John the previous season, or he's just been hurt for a lot of his career. If he's going to be healthy, if he's going to be stretched out, if he's going to be this kind of guy going forward, he's going to be the most popular pitcher on the slate, or he should be. If you can predict him for around 80, 85 pitches here, he's an absolute stud. He's the guy in the top pitchers tool who's at the very top of the board. It's pretty flat in terms of ownership there. These are the kind of guys that I think you have to make an aggressive stand. And I think Verlander is the most secure pitcher on the entire board, not even remotely close. And that's weird to say going up against Toronto, but that's really what we've seen out of him for, a 10-year, 15-year sample size is how predictable it is when you see him at the beginning of the season with his stuff that he's got. But Michael Kopech, he's an absolute stud. I'm going to be overinvested in this number.
Yeah, and also, once again, I've mentioned this before. We're kind of with a pitcher for various reasons could have some uncertainty. Michael Kopech being a young pitcher, there isn't that much sample size on other than him being a really high-end prospect. And if you watch him pitch, you just be like, oh my God, this guy's fastball is overpowering. His numbers so far this year, 1 ERA, 2.94 expected ERA, that's all well and good. The strikeout rate, not as much as we would have hoped for. But if you look at his projections this year, which is always something I like to lean on when we get to a pitcher that doesn't have that much sample size, they're really, really positive for him. Zips has him projected for a 3.77 ERA, Steamer 3.88. Both of them have around a 30% K rate. It looks like Michael Kopech, pending health, is going to be a really good pitcher this year. So I look at him as being the pitcher I want to roster in this spot. Bailey Ober, I'm with you, not that much interest on the size of this slate. So Kopech, I'm going to bet on the arm talent. I think the strikeouts are going to show up. As for the offenses in this spot, I think both the pitchers are good enough to where I don't want exposure to the offenses. You seem to be fairly low on Bailey Ober, and does that make you want to get to the White Sox at all?
Not really, because you got wind blowing in 15 miles an hour. It's freaking cold in Target Field. 50 degrees we're looking at first pitch. This is not a ballpark you try to get to in April. It's just not. So I'm going to be Xing out pretty much everything out of this game except for a lot of Kopech.
Yeah, Kopech, I think for sure. And then also to back up something you said before, there's no pitcher that's really expected to be crazy, crazy popular. I guess Verlander to an extent, who we're about to talk about, but he's the only guy projected for over 20% ownership on DraftKings today. FanDuel also, he's projected over 20, but only 20.1, which I think given how good Verlander has been this year, I don't see a way around it. And let's talk about him right now because the matchup he has, it's very difficult. He's going to be pitching against that Toronto Blue Jays offense, which very well may be the best offense in the American League. At the very least, they're a top, 3 or so offense in the AL. I don't think anybody's going to push back against that. What is Justin Verlander doing? I don't understand. What is it? And maybe this is just something that I think we have to accept is going to be the reality with a lot of high-end older athletes is once they have the resources and there's more medical advancements, we just see guys, whether it be Chris Paul, LeBron James, Justin Verlander, who could extend their career. He is 39 years old and might be the best pitcher in the American League. 0.69 ERA, 2.56 expected ERA. The strikeout rate is still there. The velocity is still there, which is one thing I'm keeping an eye on with Justin Verlander because I'm looking at him his first couple of starts of the year. And I'm thinking, what is this velocity going to look like at 39 years old? He has thrown over 3,000 career innings. He's coming off Tommy John surgery, and he is throwing the hardest he has thrown since 2011.
Mm-hmm. Just married Kate Upton.
Absolutely. I mean, he was married to Kate Upton before he wasn't throwing this hard either, and he didn't have Tommy John surgery.
Marry Kate Upton, and here you go. Life is better.
It is absolutely ridiculous. If that's all it takes to find the eternal fountain of youth, I guess I'll take the bull and I'll marry somebody like Kate Upton. She could shit on my side of the bed. But look at these numbers for. Oh, that's right. You weren't on Live Before Lock with me last night. We were talking about Amber Heard. Yeah, because Josh and I were talking about the Amber Heard thing where the Johnny Depp. He was talking about all the things. She cut off one of his fingers. She used to shit on his side of the bed. Yeah, she seems a little crazy. That aside,
slightly.
That aside, though,
Justin Upton's an upstanding lady. Stop it.
As far as we know. Yeah. Certainly helping Justin Verlander pitch well was 0.69 ERA and 2.56 expected ERA. Can we expect this to continue for Verlander? And what are you going to do with him as the most popular pitcher going up against Toronto?
I mean, you roster some. Yeah, he's 39 years old. Yeah, this makes no sense what's going on. But 31.9% K percentage. The main reason that this is just kind of intriguing too is the K percentage of a lot of these bats. I mean, in the early going from Toronto, Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero, Matt Chapman, Raimel Tapia, I'm assuming is going to be continuing to be in that lineup. George Springer, Zach Collins. These are all guys who strike out 24% or better of the time here in the early going of 2022. The only guys who really don't strike out on this team, Lourdes Gurriel, sub 19%, Espinal, sub 18%, Alejandro Kirk, if he ends up being the catcher here. Again, I think Collins ends up being the guy. He's just shown more of the pop, but we'll see who ends up being in the catcher spot. But at the same time that this Toronto lineup is definitely dangerous, there are strikeouts to be had in it, more so here now than I think last year. Not sure what the difference is, but I'm looking at Toronto as a team that you can take some risky shots on, but this isn't really that risky when you talk about Verlander up there, absolutely chucking 31.9% K percentage, limiting hard contact, 35.7% hard hit percentage. He's still elite. He's still really, really good. He should be the most popular pitcher on the board.
Mike, we're good to go over, right? We don't have anything after us because we got a million games to talk about. All right. I think that was a yes. So, all right, we're good. All right, cool. We're good to keep going then.
And there's nothing until 12:45. Yeah.
All right, cool. I just wanted to make sure. And then we'll talk about Toronto versus the Houston Astros in a segment. First, shout out to Prize Picks, the sponsor of today's show. If you guys are signing up at Prize Picks for the first time, sign up using the promo code Awesemo. You get up to $100 for free, which is something you want to take advantage of. Free money as a deposit bonus. And then also 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Get access to all the tools that we have, like MLB top stack odds, MLB top pitcher percentage, all stuff that I know I wouldn't be able to build my MLB lineups without. So another good benefit if you sign up at Prize Picks using our promo code Awesemo. Now let's talk about Ross Stripling, who, there was a point in time where Stripling was pitching really well for the Los Angeles Dodgers, but I just don't think he's that guy anymore. And something else also, a lot of his success that he had when he was with the Dodgers came out of the bullpen. And now when he's moved into a starting pitching role, it just seems like something he hasn't taken to quite as well. The Houston Astros, we talked about the Toronto Blue Jays arguably having the best offense in the American League. Well, the Houston Astros are another team that's in that conversation. So Houston, this is a team that I'm going to have in my player pool that I'm looking to stack up. Are you going to be doing the same?
Oh, sorry. First show. Sorry about it. The mute button, as if I've never hit this in my entire life. Houston's always a team that I stack up a lot. Everybody knows my love affair with Kyle Tucker. I think he's an unbelievable human being. Jordan Alvarez, pretty good. Jeremy Pena at the top of this lineup now. What a time to be alive. Jose Siri, if he ends up there. Chas McCormick, Michael Brantley. Michael Brantley hitting the ball pretty hard early on. 50% hard hit percentage and a 571 expected slugging. You're always going to see that expected batting average up there, 336. That's what he does. He gets on base. And shout out to Chris Pennell. That's his boy. So Michael Brantley, I think I'm going to be putting in some more stacks than I did last year for sure. I think there's some upside up and down this entire lineup. Weird to see Alex Bregman be one of the guys who's struggling in terms of StatCast data, 34.3% hard hit percentage. I'm expecting that to go going in a better direction for him here. Yuli Gurriel never strikes out. He's a complete contact guy, doesn't get gypped up at the plate either, never walks. And so he's always an interesting guy. I expect things to improve for him too. I feel like I rostered him more than I maybe should have last year. I've kind of bought into the talent for years that he was a little bit underappreciated, but this team outside of Martin Maldonado, who even right now, 52.4% hard hit percentage. He's normally the guy that I X out on my Houston stacks. He's hitting the ball hard at the moment. So this entire offense going up against Ross Stripling, has he been decent from time to time? Sure, but he doesn't miss bats. That's going to be problematic. The walk rate's been up a little bit here this season. I don't know if that's going to maintain. He's not a guy that's ever had like a drastic walk problem before, but I feel like this is just too good of an offense to write off.
Ready for a futures bet, Eric?
Ready.
Jeremy Pena plus 850 to win the American League Rookie of the Year. So he has been ridiculously good to start the year to the point where, people are saying the offseason, like, oh, Astros being cheap. Why aren't they paying for Carlos Correa? What odds would you give Pena to finish with more wins above replacement than Correa this year?
Pretty good.
He's already one of the most, at least, and by the way, this is only through it's only through the first 10 games of the season, but he's already produced one win above replacement. He's a 182 WRC plus. Now, if you look at projection models, Zip, Steamer, he's now projected to be a guy who's going to be worth 3 to 4 wins this year. He's already playing close to an all-star level. They dumped Carlos Correa and just brought in potentially another Carlos Correa here, and Jeremy Pena, 24 years old. He was not a well-regarded prospect, even though he absolutely crushed at the minor league level. It looks like the Astros just do this. They just churn out these young guys. So, remember, Jose Altuve was not a highly regarded prospect. Even Yordan Alvarez, he was seen as a guy who was obviously a good hitting prospect. But if you look, like Keith Law didn't even have him as a top 100 prospect when he first got called up, because there was questions of where is he going to play in the field? As good as the bat is he going to be some kind of like transcendent hitter? And it looks like potentially. So this is a team that just is really good at churning out prospects. And I kind of view it similarly to how I look at Kentucky basketball players when it comes to the NBA draft. And it's just, be higher on players like this than other people just because of the track record. Young Houston prospects the team is high on. I think these are guys we want to also be high on. So anyway, I like Jeremy Pena a lot today, plus 850 for Rookie of the Year. I think that's something to jump on because he has been very good so far. I love stacking up the Houston Astros. Let's move on to the next game.
I bet Torkelson, so I hope that doesn't win. But yes, I agree that that's a good number to get right now.
Torkelson's also really good. It's just the number where he's at plus 850. Yeah.
I totally get it. He's been a stud.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of guys who I'm a little surprised Bobby Witt Jr. is still a favorite to win the American League Rookie of the Year, because as much as he's a well-regarded prospect, he hasn't been nearly as good as guys like Spencer Torkelson or Steven Kwan or Jeremy Pena, who are priced well beyond him. And then even guys like
Rodriguez has been struggling pretty hard too. I mean, a lot of the studs have, coming out. I mean, it was Torkelson, it was Rodriguez, it was Witt Jr., just kind of off to a really tough start. And Pena, the nice thing about him too, is he got upgraded to the number one. Like, he's leading off for this baseball team now. That's a pretty ridiculous type of a vote of confidence that Houston already has in him. Just gets more chances to accumulate more stats. So regardless of us looking at StatCast data, lineup positioning can be something in terms of just accumulating stats that can matter big time. So seeing him leading off is a definite plus in that bet.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, better chance for counting stats, a chance for, the difference between batting first or batting eighth could often be one extra at bat per game, which obviously also makes a difference because, somebody's getting 4 at bats or 5 at bat or 4 plate appearances or 5 plate appearances. It's 25% more playing time if we're looking at it from an NBA comp. So yeah, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And also for Rookie of the Year odds, like Matt Brash has looked really good. He's 15 to 1. A lot of good young players in baseball now. Next game here, talking about players with good teams, Los Angeles Angels at home against the Baltimore Orioles. The Angels get a matchup against Bruce Zimmerman, who, while he has pitched well so far this year, I don't buy into any Orioles pitcher ever being good under any circumstance. It doesn't matter. You could have Nolan Ryan, prime Nolan Ryan, show up and just start pitching for the Baltimore Orioles. He's going to get hit when he puts on that Orioles uniform. And, I guess things will be different from a counting number standpoint this year because that ballpark looks like it's going to be more pitcher friendly. But in general, I think Zimmerman's going to drop off in a pretty big way. The Angels offense has a whole lot of firepower, but another team, kind of like the Yankees, who are also going to be over-owned, at least per our top stacks, from one of the only teams that are in this situation. 12% projected ownership for the Angels, around a 6% chance to be a top stack on FanDuel and DraftKings. Obviously, I like guys like Ohtani and Trout as one-offs, but it's going to be hard for me to be overweight to the field on this team as a stack when they are this popular. But what are you going to be doing with some of your boys like Shohei Ohtani, who I know you love?
Yeah, I love Ohtani, and getting Trout back in this lineup is huge. They said 2 days ago that he was going to play today for the Angels, or in this spot. So I'm just fine firing up either one of them. Same kind of issue though that you run into with those two that I just talked about with Judge. It's so hard to put them in lineups and feel good about rostering a 20-25% owned one-off when you can get so many guys in comparable spots on a 13-game slate that you can get, for one, cheaper salaries, two, equal type upside, where you can just pick the guys in the best spots. And it shouldn't be that difficult to get a little bit different in that regard. Now, there are two guys that I would never write off of any slate, period. I think there's still some 2-mans and some 5-man stacks that I'll get up against Bruce Zimmerman, who, if you go back to last season, only a 19.6% K percentage at a 6.39 expected ERA. I'm expecting that he gives up a run eventually. I'm expecting him to probably give up multiple here in this spot. It's just a question of if that stack is going to be viable at this ownership. Probably not here right now, because you do want to probably get Trout and Ohtani in the middle of that up against this bad lefty. He's not going to be good long-term.
And then on the other side of the game, Reed Detmers pitching for the Angels. I'm fairly confident that Reed Detmers is not going to be particularly good this year. The projection models are not super high on him. I mean, he's a young pitcher with a good arm, so maybe I'm understating him a little bit, but struggled last year in the limited time he was in the big leagues with a 7.4 ERA, 5.62 expected ERA. This year so far, 8.59 ERA, 4.79 expected ERA. He is a young arm, which we could say he has some talent. He's throwing 93.6 miles per hour as his average fastball velocity to this point. Are you going to take any shots on him against this pretty piss poor Orioles offense?
I want to. I need you to tell me that it's okay to do it, though.
Not in a major way. I think looking at Detmers, he's 7,700. He's projected for double-digit ownership. If you have a couple lineups with him in it as kind of a plug-in, okay, cool. But I'd rather roster Tariq Skubal. I'd rather roster Trevor Rogers for $1,200 less. And it's not that I like the Baltimore Orioles offense. Clearly, we were just talking about the worst offense in baseball. And even if I thought that it's not the Orioles when we were talking about it before, it's not me advocating for them being a good offense. I'm more inclined to just take neither side of this game because Reed Detmers, once again, while he is a highly regarded young pitcher, we haven't really seen the success yet. And then also some of the projection models aren't super high on him. Zips hasn't projected for a 4.6 ERA. I'm more inclined to just take neither side of the game, at least in terms of Detmers versus the Orioles offense.
Okay. I'm looking at some of these bats. I mean, you've got Hayes Santander, the only guy striking out less than 25% of the time in this lineup. So I want to see that Chirinos ends up being the catcher in this spot. And nothing that I've seen from him shows that there could be any resurgency. Just ridiculous that he's still there. Chirinos, 25% K percentage. That's actually him and Mancini better in terms of this entire lineup. I think I'm probably going to have a couple shares of Reed Detmers, but I'm with you where I don't think he's a guy that I prioritize over other guys that exist in that range. I think we're on the same page there. Once
again, I'm asking you, my friends who are watching the show, to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm only asking you as a friend. I understand it. It's a click of the button. It could be a hassle. Some people, I think Eric has weak fingers. I know it's painful for him to click that button. Yeah, look at it. It's difficult. It could be tough for some people, but for you, healthy people at home that are friends of ours, just click that like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It does help us out a whole bunch. Also, Eric, have you played F1 DFS at all?
I've not played any F1. I know you've been smashing those streaks.
I've played one F1 tournament and I won it. And I have not played since, but I think now is maybe the time to get back involved because
go do it.
We have projections up on the site and we have a promo code. If you use the promo code ZOOM, like the car or sound makes, ZOOM, ZOOM, at checkout, you'll get 1 week of F1 projections for only $1. Good way to just check out the tools, see what the projections are. And believe it or not, I know nothing about F1, but like I said, I've played one Formula One tournament and I came in first place in it just because I looked at our projections, did nothing else other than did that, looked at the rules, tried to figure out some strategy. And that was all I did. So I would like to play more F1. It just needs some more regular start times. And then I'll be back in the F1 street. So maybe this weekend or whatever the next race is. But our projections in my personal experience, like I said, I played one. I came in first. It seems like they're pretty good because I'm
one
no
of
shit
one.
about those
1.000 is
exactly perfect. The other standpoint too is, should I just retire from F1 DFS and be like, I'm the best? I've played one tournament. I came in first. Yeah. Nobody could ever beat me. It's another way to look at it. Next game on the slate.
Bunt a single and retire.
Yeah. Oh, that wasn't a single. That was a double. It can't be more than that though, because it tied with a handful of people. I think it was like me and like 22 people tied for first place. So not a home run. Solo first would have been a home run, but I was still happy with the results. Next game to talk about: New York Mets, Arizona Diamondbacks. Zach Gallen's a pitcher who I never think is really appropriately priced by Sportsbook, because I think Gallen is solid. But the Mets are big favorites in this spot, which I guess they should be because it's the Diamondbacks. But they also have an implied team total of nearly 5 runs. I just don't think that's accurate against Zach Gallen, who is much better than typically I think sportsbooks give him credit for. There was a bunch of games last year I was betting over on his strikeout props, like 3.5 or 4.5. And once again, I just think the Mets are being a little bit over-owned in this spot. So in terms of Zach Gallen as a pitcher, I'm not looking to roster him against New York, but I'm not really looking to stack the Mets against him either.
Yeah, he's I'm pretty sure I always think of Zach Gallen being the guy that I had like a long conversation. Rinpack ended up rostering him in Coors Field for the World Baseball Championships last year. And so we were just talking about Zach Gallen and his arm potential, and 26.6% K percentage last season. He's around a 27.4% for his career. The Ks haven't even been there. I don't know how far he's going to pitch here into this game. I think that's kind of the major concern. But he's 6,300, 66 pitches. We've seen a number of times guys go from 66 to like 80. I actually have some interest in playing some Zach Gallen in this spot just because of what that K percentage actually is over his entire career. He's a really good pitcher and somebody I've always looked as such. He's actually very, very bottom end of the top pitchers tool, 4.5%. But yes, it's a very potent Mets offense. Yes, he's got a 0.5% ownership, but he's much, much better than people give him credit for. So I'm actually going to be rostering him in 150.
I actually don't really hate that either. It's a 12 games. I'm not sure if I'm ultimately going to end up getting to him, but as an SP2 on DraftKings, FanDuel single pitcher site, no reason to consider him, but 6,300 with less than 1% ownership. I think there's a little bit of arm talent in Gallen. I could be swayed into getting him into some of my lineups. So I don't totally hate that. On the other side of the game, there aren't going to be very many spots I'm looking to roster the Diamondbacks offense. This isn't any different against David Peterson. I don't think Peterson is bad, but I don't think he warrants the price tag that he has today either, because he is, I believe, 9K on DraftKings. Peterson is, 9K on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Peterson is 7,600. Even the 7,600, I think, is a little steep for Peterson on a single pitcher site. He's good enough. I don't want to roster Arizona. Not going to play David Peterson either. A spot I'm cool with taking out of my player pool. Are you cool with taking out of your player pool?
Yes, I am. How about that for analysis?
All right, there we go. That is easy enough. We're on the same page there. And that also helps us move on because we're already over time, but we got a couple other games left to talk about. So Seattle Mariners, Kansas City Royals. By the way, this is another game that I don't really want a whole lot of exposure to pitchers or hitter-wise. Chris Flexen on the mound for Seattle, very low strikeout pitcher who's also been decent in the last couple of years. So I know he's not off to the best start this year with an expected ERA over 10, but that aside, I think he's going to be fine this year. The matchup against the Royals at home in a pitcher-friendly park, I don't think there's enough strikeout upside to really want to roster Chris Flexen. But on the other side with Brad Keller, another guy who's serviceable, but not going to strike a whole lot of guys out, a lot of pitchers to choose from. I don't like the pitchers. I don't like the offenses. Could you talk me into anything in this game?
I will talk you into a Kansas City stack, and here's why.
Okay.
You get the best hitting catcher. I talked about Real Muto. He's up there, but you get Sal Perez in this lineup. We've seen Bobby Witt Jr. be very, very bad, but he still remains around 3K with a crazy amount of promise that exists in that bat. Whit Merrifield, Benintendi. I think they're decent enough outfield options. Hunter Dozier has a crazy amount of pop, if nothing else, there in this lineup. And Mondesi, he's had a brutal start to the season, but we've seen the kind of upside that can exist there. They are completely unknown. This is the case you're going to have for 4 or 5 different teams. But the difference with Kansas City is I can actually see a path for a number of their hitters just going after Flexen here in this spot. He is a terrible pitcher. 10.88 expected ERA now through 2 starts. only a 16.9% K percentage last season. That's bottom 10% of all of Major League Baseball starters, only a 16% K percentage on the season. And all of last year, we saw him improve that walk rate, but for his career, it's been closer to 9%. He's had some walk problems, and they're starting to show up a little bit more. That always makes me want to see some stacks for guys with stolen base upside, and that's where Whit Merrifield can come in handy. That's where a guy like Mondesi can come in handy. So I think there are a number of paths for this Kansas City team to be potent. I want Sal Perez in every single one of those stacks because he's a guy that, you know, if the table's set for him, you just want to be getting all of that upside. He's the best hitter in this lineup. I feel really good about Kansas City as a team that I want to get to 5+% of in 150 today.
Interesting. So I'm maybe a little higher on Chris Flexen than you. I don't think he's good. I don't think he sucks either, though. He had a 3.61 ERA last year, 4.27 expected ERA. From a fantasy standpoint, there just isn't enough strikeouts for him to matter. And the year before, he went overseas. He pitched in the KBO, which, you know, I love myself some KBO baseball. I can't read what team he's on because that's not within my repertoire to know whatever those symbols are. But that aside, in the KBO, 3.01 ERA, 2.74 FIP. He did strike out guys over there, but we can't pull too much from that. Either way, though, I think Chris Flexen is a serviceable big league pitcher. He has okay projections on Zips and Steamer, 4.41 ERA, 4.39 expected ERA. I think he's going to be fine today more often than not, but also not enough to matter in DFS, but then also probably limit the damage the Royals do. So I'll be writing this game off. I'll be looking elsewhere. Big slate, a lot of options to choose from. Next game, San Diego Padres, Los Angeles Dodgers. Nick Martinez, talking about pitchers that went overseas. Remember, we had that slate you and I were doing, and this was Nick Martinez's first start of the season. We talked about the money commitment that the Padres had made to him, and we were in between. There was 3 somewhat popular cheap pitchers on that slate. It was Nick Martinez. It was the love of your life, Michael Lorenzen, the best hitting pitcher in the history of baseball.
Yes, it was.
And then Dylan Bundy. And we debated for a very long time about which one of these terrible pitchers we wanted to take chances on. And you know what ended up happening? All 3 of them crushed that day, and it was a totally moot conversation because you could play any of them and gotten good results. I don't care because this time Nick Martinez is pitching against the Dodgers. No interest at all so far this year. He has struggled a little bit. The strikeouts haven't been there. The earned runs have been there. So 20% K rate, 6.56 expected ERA. The Dodgers are going to hit most offenses and most pitchers. And here's something that's also just unfair about the Dodgers. Gavin Lux is playing well this year. Cody Bellinger doesn't suck anymore. He looks more like the guy from 2 years ago.
Doesn't suck anymore. Yeah, I was going to say, easy. They give him $17 million. I don't think they.
Well, he sucked last year.
Yeah, he sucked last year. He had some struggles, but a lot of people had struggles coming out of COVID. Come on, Greg, stop it.
He struggled massively. I didn't know what to make of Cody Bellinger list. Were you like
then
really
he got
confident?
quote unquote hot in the playoffs there for a while. I mean, again, the urgency of being able to hit in the playoffs. I don't really know. It's one of those things where every player is going to fall into slumps. Every player is going to get hot, quote unquote. Cody Bellinger over a large sample size is just a phenomenal hitter. And the fact that they were able to lock him up for just $17 million on a 1-year contract to basically test drive him is pretty unfair. Gavin Lux, he was AAA player of the year, 2 years ago, and hadn't really seen it translate, but now he's good. This entire lineup is just stupid. It's an all-star team. So Nick Martinez is also not good. Can we establish that Nick Martinez is not good?
Maybe.
That was what I was tilted about, is that, he went to KBO and made all these fixes. No, he didn't. He's got a 6.54 expected ERA. That would be the highest of his career. I know it's only 2 starts, but I don't think we're going to see anything out of him going forward that means that we have to get to him. So he's walking guys. It would be a career high rate at 11.1% for him there as well. There's nothing out of Nick Martinez that I find all that intriguing. Low 90s fastball. The changeup doesn't really move. I'm seeing the cutter is a below average pitch. He's getting a couple of whiffs with that, but it's just not a pitcher that I believe in whatsoever.
Can I correct you on something? Because I love my overseas baseball. He did not pitch in the KBO. He pitched in the Nippon Professional Baseball League for the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters. He was a ham fighter. He wasn't he wasn't in the KBO.
Go ham fighters.
Yeah, exactly. Come on. We got to know our Asian baseball teams. But either way, Nick Martinez, regardless of what you make of him, this is not the spot to get to him at all against the Dodgers. I'm going to be stacking up Los Angeles against him. This lineup is going to be death on just about every single pitcher. There's very few times I'm going to be wanting to play pitchers in DFS against them. But on the other side, Julio Urias is going to be on the mound for the Dodgers. He was pretty stellar last year. At least to this point, he's seen a little bit of a dip, at least in terms of strikeout rate. We haven't seen him whiffing all that many guys. It's funny. He's only 25 years old, but he's been around for so long because he was considered a top pitching prospect when he was 16 years old. Julio Urias. So he's 25. We've known about this guy for like 10 years. He's been really good the last few years. I think he's going to be fairly good this year as well. But there are a couple issues with him from an upside standpoint in DFS. He isn't the highest strikeout upside pitcher in the world. And Los Angeles tends to be a little cautious with his pitch counts in games. So I think that makes him somebody who, if you have a little bit of exposure to him, all well and good. But at $9,800 over on FanDuel, it's pretty steep. And then DK also $10,100, fairly steep. If he's in the lineup here and there, okay. But I'm not going to prioritize him. I don't want to stack against him either. What do you make of Urias in the start to the season?
I can't really get there. 57, 65 pitches. I mean, 75, you're basically looking at as like an absolute cap. I would be floored if he got up to 80, just knowing Dave Roberts, knowing how the Dodgers really handle their pitching staff. You alluded to it. I mean, you're pulling Kershaw in a perfect game with 80 pitches. They're much more interested in having everybody healthy come September, October. So this is not going to be any kind of an issue for me to just write off Julio Urias. I think it just takes away shares from Verlander, who's stretched out and flame throwing. I think it takes away shares of cheaper pitchers that I just think have comparable upsides to his K rate. It's just a pitcher I'm probably not going to play at all.
But then at the same time, I have no interest stacking the Padres against him because, the other thing too is if you get, say, even 4 or 5 innings at Urias, if he knows he's on a limited pitch count, he can maybe max out his effort a little bit, and the Dodgers have a pretty good bullpen behind him. I have no interest in the Padres as a stack. Are you going to roster them at all against Urias?
I'm going to have individual hitters that I think stand out a little bit to me. Manny Machado, I think you can always play. Austin Nola is always viable at catcher because that's the position that it is. But Jurickson Profar, I don't know what to make of his early season resurgence, but he's moving up in the order here. A 443 xWOBA early on here. Last year was brutal. He was absolutely brutal. This year, though, walking at a high clip, striking out about the same. But that xWOBA of 443, and then the actual WOBA 432, he's making some hard contact. So maybe this is something that's actually happening. He's, not even 30 years old yet. Maybe he's seeing some massive improvements here later on. And I don't know. I don't know what to make of it all. But when I see somebody going completely unowned that's sticking out that much in terms of StatCast, you want to have a little bit of interest. So, I mean, regardless of who they bring in, he seems to have seen something that's improving in that department. It's a very small sample size. Once again, I'm not going crazy with it, but I think there's some actual viability to getting to a couple San Diego hitters.
All right, let's talk about the final game on the slate, Texas Rangers, Oakland A's. Let's hit on Glenn Otto, who's making his first start of this season. He pitched a little bit at the big league level last year. It went poorly. He made 6 starts with the Texas Rangers, 23 innings, 9.26 ERA, 5.19 expected ERA. And, Glenn Otto at times had some success in the minor leagues, but here's also the reality with him. He is a 26-year-old unranked prospect with a future value grade over on FanGraphs in their scouting thing that they have going on there. So I highly doubt that Glenn Otto is going to be all that successful this year, but here's the other side. You know what else isn't going to be successful here? The Oakland A's and their terrible offense. And Glenn Otto is really cheap. So I don't know what to make of this spot. I'm hoping you could help guide me. Potentially terrible pitcher, almost certainly terrible offense. Which side of it do you prefer?
Well, I'm definitely preferring the Glenn Otto side. I don't think it's actually remotely close for me. Top Pitchers Tool has him as a top 2 pitcher. We're not talking value. Top 2 pitcher 9% of the time, which at 5,800 is very rare. If you go through some of his AAA numbers here so far, 2 starts, last time out, 7 scoreless. We had 9.26 ERA last year. You alluded to that. That's not good. That is very bad. But he seems to be stretched out here. Let's see. It's going to be an all right spot, I think, to get some Glenn Otto. At least he's cheap. At least you have an opportunity to get to somebody that is going up against one of the worst offenses in baseball. One of the things we had talked about was going up against Baltimore if we wanted to get to Detmers. The big difference between him and Detmers, is price. And you're going to be able to play Glenn Otto at 5,800. Seems like our top pitchers tool likes him as well. Nothing that looks like it stands out. Looking at his pitching report on FanGraphs, I mean, a curveball that seems different, seems decent. Fastball's just okay here. But looking at Steamer, looking at Zips, I think they expect him to just be okay. Nothing spectacular. 1.24 home run per 9. Going across the board, I don't see any reason not to have some shares of him today.
I mean, he's cheap enough where it's okay to get some shares of him. The other side with Oakland, I can't have interest in stacking them up on a 13 game slate, 26 teams to choose from. They have the lowest odds of being the top stack of the day. And that is against a pitcher in Glenn Otto, probably isn't particularly good. So I have no interest in Oakland as a stack, but as for Glenn Otto, once again, not a priority for me. He's cheap enough on DK to use as an SP2. I wouldn't go and roster him on FanDuel on a single pitcher site. So that's kind of where I'm standing on this game. Then on the other side, Adam Oller is going to be on the mound for Oakland. Not somebody we know all that much about in the limited amount of time we have seen him pitching this year. He has shown a 20% K rate, but a 9.68 expected ERA, 3.43 whip. So he is letting a lot of guys get on base against him. As his acumen as a pitching prospect, non-existent. Another guy similar like Glenn Otto, 27 years old, to spend his entire career in the minor leagues. Mediocre results at the minor league level. This looks like a replacement level guy. I like to call these guys, well, not me particularly, but something that's been coined as a quadruple A player. Somebody who's kind of just stuck around in a team system for a really long time. If you need them for a spot start, they could come up, but projection models aren't high on him. I can't be either. If I'm taking a side of this, I do like getting the Texas Rangers stacks a little bit because this is a guy who's bounced around the minor league systems, Pirates, Giants, Mets, Oakland. I doubt Oller's any good, and the Rangers offense has improved this year. I think they could do some damage against them, even in a pitcher-friendly park.
I'm okay landing on some shares, which sounds stupid to say, but again, it's a guy in the top pitchers tool, 6% chance of finishing as a top 2 pitcher, 0.5% ownership. He's stretched out 2 starts now this season, or not 2 starts, 2 appearances this season, 56 and 75 pitches. If you can give me 80 pitches against a 3-9 Texas team that has as many strikeouts as they can have, this could go very, very poorly for him, no doubt about it. But I don't believe Texas is some incredible batting squad now just because they added Corey Seager, just because they added Brad Miller, and just because they added Marcus Semien, who has been very bad to start off this season. There's still some strikeouts to be had here. Specifically, I would like to Eli White won't be in that lineup. Charlie Culberson probably not either, but Cole Calhoun, yeah, this isn't going to be a ton of Ks, but he's at least stretched out. He's super cheap. If he limits some of the damage, there's a path to him getting 12, 15. If he outperforms somebody there at the bottom end, of course, I do prefer getting to Otto a little bit more than Oller. It's so weird saying both of those names together, but I think it's all right in 150 if you're going to land on a couple shares. You're just looking for a punt to get in all the expensive bats. And the best part about him is it seems like he has an 80 pitch workload in store if he's pitching all right.
All right. That covers everything. We've hit on all 13 games. We talked about every pitcher. We talked about every offense. Eric, do you have any other final thoughts on the slate?
Oh, it's a massive slate, 13 gamers. We're talking through it. So many spots to identify. Don't try to cover every single base. That is really an important part. You can't play absolutely everybody. Be specific about how you go about roster construction. I was talking about one-offs where I don't want to have the most expensive bats or the most popular bats be my one-offs all the time. So many places where you can identify a comparable bat at 1/10 of the ownership. So find some paths to get different and good luck.
And with that, that is going to do it for us. One final time, please like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, show everybody that you have stronger fingers than Eric Lindquist and you're capable of hitting that like and subscribe button. Good luck. We'll check you guys out tonight. Eric and I will be on live before lock together. We love you and see you later.
We love you.
We do. We love everybody. We love all of our loyal listeners.
What is wrong?